Welcome back to the People's Water Board Coalition Water Wednesdays webcast. Today we are joined with our director, the People's Water Board Director, Sylvia Orduno. Sylvia, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here today. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I love that you're our first guest of the year. We are so excited to have you on to kind of talk about the things that the People's Water Board Coalition is planning throughout the year, how people can plug in, things and moves that they can be making. And it's so important to us that we're having these conversations so folks absolutely know how to. That's the main purpose for Water Wednesday, right? People get to know the issues and they are able to plug in. So I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. There's a lot we're already thinking about that we need to do, a lot to reflect on from last year, victories, struggles, and, what's ahead of us this year. We've got a lot of work to be doing.
We do. And it's going to take a lot of people to do it. So it's great to have you on the show. It's a short show, so I'm going to jump right in.
Okay.
What types of things are happening in Michigan to make water unaffordable? There's a lot of ins and outs, right?
Mm-hmm. Gosh, there's so many things happening, as you said there, and they're happening in big ways and small ways. I think, you're well aware of all the concerns going on with data centers. We were in Bay City a few days ago, and it was one of the items on the agenda. And residents came out in several numbers to say, look, we don't want that here. We're concerned. We're paying attention to what's happening to conversations in other cities. And there have been lots of great online videos and testimonials from residents who are saying that, we've got real concerns about what this means for our water department, for our environment, for the cost that might impact our own bills. And so that's a big conversation. We continue to hear people talking about their concerns with infrastructure, right? We've got a lot of old systems here in Michigan. We've still got some communities that have wood pipes, right? Believe it or not. And we've got lead service lines in many places. Our homes are among those that are still trying to figure out, how do we deal with the lead concerns? And we've got local governments trying to figure out, well, how do they keep the cost down when residents can't afford to pay? But they know that the residential and the commercial water base is all they can draw from, right? Those water bills are what keep those water departments going.
And we were working with this old infrastructure that has to be updated. So that adds to the cost, right? And
Absolutely.
When we're talking about data centers, they're using up huge amounts of water and they really don't have to pay for it. Why the people around the data centers, they end up having to pay that, right? They end up, and they can't afford their water.
One way or another.
Yes.
Because these systems have to operate, be maintained, be upgraded. And the way that it works is if a local government doesn't have the funding for that, then they've got to take out loans or bonds or raise the rates, and someone ends up having to pay those debts. And it typically is the customer base.
Yeah. I mean, and when people are already struggling to pay their water, right? It's already unaffordable. It really is like a strain on whole communities. And plus, they're soaking up whole aquifers, things like that. So it really is one of those things. And then you talk about the infrastructure, all of that compiled on. We also learned, throughout the year, we talked to residents throughout Michigan that their water bills tacked onto their trash bills, right? Or if they're renting, if the water bill goes up, their rent goes up. Then it becomes like a housing crisis at the same time.
Yep.
And
some
people are already struggling.
The electric company is locally owned, and so their water bills get tied in with their electric bills as well. And then the problem with tax liens, right? If you don't get that bill paid over some time, then the local government can send it over to the local tax assessor and they can put that as a lien on your property. So there's many pressures on households, just beyond trying to figure out how to pay those bills regularly, that can then further jeopardize, other ways of what you need just to be able to keep your household going. So those are the conversations that we keep focusing on, and we keep doing this work as grassroots residents. We're very much concerned about how we do this. We know that, we've been trying to have these conversations for many years with local elected leaders and with government officials. And the only way that we've been able to get them moved is by keeping the pressure on them. And so we know that this is going to be another year of us just working hard, having those conversations, educating them about what we need, and making sure that they have the right information. Another thing that has come up that you've probably heard too is affordability has really become a national issue now, right? The
It
federal
is.
government is talking about it. Some people are talking about it in a disparaging way, but we really worked hard to make clear understandings between what is assistance and what is affordability.
That's right.
And so that word affordability is coming to more of a public discussion now, and which is good, but we have to continue to make sure that it's applied properly, right?
Right.
Instead of being
People have to
something to kind of
understand
separate
the
people.
difference between affordability and assistance and
Yes,
what those, how that plays out and how it affects
yes,
people's daily lives, right? And how they're if they're even able to afford their groceries that week, or
yes,
if they're making decisions to pay their water bill or afford groceries or pay their utility bill. People are making these really, really difficult decisions
yes.
and struggling, and that's a great way to kind of move into our next question. What are the PWBC's People's Water Board Coalition plans throughout for the year to kind of make water affordability throughout Michigan? Make water affordable throughout Michigan.
Right. Well, we really have to continue talking with our state legislators. As we learned over the past 2, 3 years, it wasn't enough for us just to keep having conversations with local officials. Every time we kept saying, look, we need an ordinance, we need a new policy or a better policy, we need ways in which to protect households. We're frequently hearing, well, we can't afford this. We don't have the resources for operating a new program or offering discounts or offering income-based bills. And we don't have the administrative budgets for these things. And it's too complicated for us to set up a new system. So we've heard all the reasons or excuses for why it's too difficult for local governments. And we can appreciate it to some extent. But we also know that this isn't just any one, two, three, four communities, right? This has really
Right.
become a statewide problem.
It is.
And we
It's a
finally have the
crisis.
data
Yeah.
now, right, to demonstrate that it's a problem. It looks different in many communities, right? It might really be about the lead service line cost. It might be about the infrastructure costs and broken mains and pipes that have to be replaced, uh, ties in with street lighting, whatever it takes to for local government to be able to operate its um, public utilities essentially. We know that it's about water towers in other communities, it's about drainage, and so it plays out in different ways. But ultimately, again, like we said earlier, it comes down to how are residents in particular going to be paying for all of those costs. And so we continue to have conversations with our state officials to say, look, we need you to look more closely at what's happening with your local government, with what your residents are saying. You don't have to take our word for it. Go and have those conversations yourself with your local water department and officials and residents, and you're going to hear those stories. So we've been doing what we can to help facilitate some of those conversations, to encourage residents to step up and tell their stories. And some of them are getting combined a little bit with some of the data center conversations. But we also want to make sure that we don't get lost in those conversations when we keep talking about for everyone's daily use of water and whatever they're being charged for sanitation or sewerage and their sewer cost. We want to make sure that we continue to emphasize that low income households have to have a way to have affordable water
Safe,
for the
affordable
entirety
water.
and
Right.
for as
Yeah.
long as it's needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is really small communities that are affected right now too. We're hearing from people on the ground. They're like, not only can I not afford my water, but it's not being sanitized right? It's not, you know, the sewage cost is through the roof, all of these things. Like, people know that their communities are struggling. Legislators have to know, so we really do have to talk to lawmakers, talk to the people who
Yes,
represent us, and tell them those stories. It's really, really important
yes,
for folks to let their voices be heard. And like you said, throughout the country, people are saying this is a huge problem. The one thing about Michigan is in a lot of ways, we are the state that kind of pushes for new and great things. And so I would love to see, like water affordability legislation and things like that pushed right here in Michigan as kind of the beginning, because that it would happen throughout the rest of the country. People would take notice, and they could say, "Hey, they did this in Michigan. They worked for the whole state to have, affordable water." And that to me would be a great victory for people. And I truly believe this is life or death, right? This would save people's
Yes.
lives. When you're talking about people having access to water, in households where there's children, where there's elderly people, where people who, have machines that actually have to take water to run, and all of these
Even
other
CPAP
things.
machines, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you need to have water. And there's so many ways and so many levels that people, I always see this as a life or death situation. So it's important the work that we do, and
Yeah.
the way that let's do it in Michigan so the rest of
Right.
the
And we
states
live
can
with
stand up and see it, right?
Yeah, we live with the great irony of having so much abundant fresh water here, yet having so many people with water insecurity. And so that alone is starting to catch the attention of some of the state representatives that are like, yeah, why should Michigan, of all places, have so many residents that struggle with being able to keep up with their water? And one of the things that I appreciated at a hearing that we had in the fall, or that Senator Chang had with Senator Irwin in the Housing and Human Services Committee, is something that was brought up by another senator who said, you know what, I really don't see this as a partisan issue. And I'm talking to my colleagues and really encourage them to just see this as something that all Michiganders need.
That's right.
And so those kinds of things are really helping, right, with being able to just split the Republican and Democratic differences down and just like, how do we do this as something
This is a
that
human
is a
need,
human
right?
need?
Yeah. Yeah. Sylvia, we've got all this work to do, and we've been doing it on the ground. We really are the experts at it. How can people get involved? How can they, what can people do, and steps that they can take right now to really help get water affordability for Michigan?
Well, there are a few different things. Part of it is continuing to educate and using accurate information. It's often easy on social media for people to spread misinformation or sometimes just not tell the truth. And we see that happening sometimes with people who are trying to understand the Senate bills in particular, right? Senate bills 248 through 255. And people either misunderstand them or making assumptions about them that really aren't in the language themselves. The other thing that has been really important for us to do is to make sure that it's understood that this is not just about helping low income households be able to pay regularly, consistently, but it's also about being able to ensure that our local public water departments have all of the resources they need to operate, maintain, and again, deal with upgrades as needed. And if our water departments don't have that revenue, if they end up breaking down, then they're vulnerable to privatization or some other kind
Which
of
is never
takeover.
good.
And so that's a very real issue when you start looking at what it takes for local governments to operate and the budgets that they have to put together. So we're trying to encourage more of that kind of inward looking at the local government level and lessen really the blaming and shaming that's been going on for a lot of years about residents just won't pay their bills or they want free water, and really breaking down the myths from the facts, right? And so we're going to work on doing better about that. We also want to encourage people to continually contact your state representative. We hear from them regularly that it matters when people are contacting. It
Yeah.
gives them a pulse of what those concerns are for residents. And especially when people are willing to tell their own stories, or if they feel
So
like,
important.
they're not comfortable telling that story, you can even do things anonymously. You can send a note, to their online email, or you can write a letter, or you can at least tell a story for someone else that you know and let them
Yeah.
know, they weren't comfortable saying for themselves, but I need you to know what's happening in people's lives. That kind of storytelling helps as well.
Yeah.
It also
It
really
really
helps
makes a
if people
difference.
are connecting right with their local community action agency or United Way and getting those resources, using the resources when they're available. And again, letting them know we need you to find ways to get more resources, right? Because the need is greater than what you believe. Encouraging people to fill out those applications, making sure that everyone gets what they're eligible for and not
That's
letting
right.
funds sit. But we know that the need is greater than what the resources are.
Yeah,
So
we
those
got
are
very,
two of the
very
ways there.
little
But
water funding.
people can also use their social media accounts, right? To contact their state reps or contact their local officials and keep reminding them, keep making this a hot button issue. Don't let it be something that fades away because there's so many things that are competing for people's attention, right? But if we keep this up there as a top level issue, then we keep getting the visibility that it needs.
It's so important that A, we're telling our stories, and B, that we're coming together to actually, on our social media pages, all of those things. Yes.
Yes.
So important that those stories get to the people who make these decisions about funding and things like that. Because we got very little funding in Michigan. Let's be honest. It was
Well, there's
we
been
did
so
get
many cuts,
some,
right?
right? We did get some, but it was very, very little. And it's just, like a drop in the
Yeah,
bucket.
the last budget appropriation for was only $5 million for the whole state. That's nothing,
That's nothing.
right?
It's a tiny drop in a bucket. Tiny.
Mhm.
Sylvia, thank you for spending your life, dedicating your life doing this. Do you have any other final thoughts, things that people need to know before we wrap up the show?
We need to really start paying attention, at least in Detroit, about concerns that the water department has with not having that lifeline program be operating in full like it was before, right? They relied upon federal funding through COVID to get it set up and to be able to set up those payments for folks that they could afford. And it was working for them, it was working for households, and we need that again. But right now they're operating something that's a much smaller scale. A big worry, and what can be very much real, is the city pressuring local government to go back and move water debt onto property taxes. It stopped several years ago. I think it was back in 2013,
Yeah,
2014, and the city realized, look, if we do this, we're also jeopardizing the housing market. We're
right.
jeopardizing neighborhoods,
It
and we're
puts
trying to
people in
keep
a
people
water
in
crisis and
homes.
a
We
housing
want to encourage
crisis at
more
the
people
same
to come into
time.
the city. But if you start making it that people start losing their homes like they did before, or people weren't given due process like they were before, and attorneys weren't able to save people's homes because it was too late, houses were already on the market, and then people start taking vigilante justice, right? Say, you're not kicking me out of the home that I've owned for years and my family's been in just because of some water bills. Give people a chance to actually pay their bills in an affordable way, right? So we don't want to go back to those kind of circumstances that make it difficult for households and for our neighborhoods, right? So we've got to make sure that we stay on top of the water department to not go back to practices that aren't going to help them anyway, right? It's only going to make things less trustful, for one, for us to continue to work with water departments if they're going to take these kinds of actions, but also it's going to make it so that we're not accomplishing what we ultimately need. So that's
That's
one
right.
thing that's going to have to be part of how we think out
Huge part of the
our engagement,
conversation.
right, for this next year, not just with Detroit, but with other water departments that start feeling the pressure about what do you do with debt that isn't getting paid. Another thing is we've got to really deal more with the water quality issue in many communities, right? So beyond the lead service line, there's a lot of communities as residents that continue to use bottled water because their water coming out of the tap is not good, right? So we've got to connect the affordability issue with the water quality issue
That's
so
right.
that we tell local governments, look, why would people want to pay you if they're having to drink a bottled water because the water coming out of the tap is no good? So we've
Right.
got to combine that for some communities. Again, tie it with data centers, as we talked about earlier, so that we're talking about the small picture with the big picture
That's
issues.
right.
There's a lot of local government, city council members, commissioners, they're not really paying attention to these details. They think things are operating fine. But even I've had a couple of them talk to me lately about their concerns with what the local government is charging to turn water back on or
Right.
with paying a bill online. I'm like, well, these are things you all have control of. The
Right. You can fix this.
schedule,
Make
you
it
can
work.
change that
Right.
yourselves, right? But they don't always know the details because they haven't been impacted. So part of our education, both at the local and the state level, is to tell them, you've got to look at what it is you're charging people, why it is people are upset about it, and why people struggle. So
That's
we've
right.
got that education to do in many local communities. If residents in different communities want us to help them with being able to have those conversations, or we can provide information to them about the kinds of things you might want to look into or ask about, we can also help them with that. But we're finding that it's really important for us to continue to engage locally as well as at the state.
Well, this is such a great conversation. I'm glad that we started the year off with it. And it's really important that folks understand what we're doing, what we do on our daily basis, on a daily basis to make water affordable for folks. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for coming on the show and kind of explaining it and laying it all out. And and for pointing out ways that people can get involved, because that really is, having our voices in unison saying we need safe, affordable water throughout Michigan is so epically important right now. So thank you, and thank you for really dedicating your life to this cause. It's a noble one for sure. I
Thank you, Margie. And
appreciate
I
you.
appreciate what you and Nicole and Angelica have continued to do to keep the Water Wednesday show going and hitting hot topics and really bringing in voices from many directions so that people really understand the water crisis that we're living under.
Thank you, Sylvia. Until next time, my friends, Happy New Year. These are hard times. Please look out for each other, call each other up, make sure you're doing okay, and try to stay afloat together. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.